This program has been brought to you thanks to the generous contributions of our patrons on Patreon. Your patronage is greatly appreciated. And for more content like this, be sure to check out the Modern Alchemist channel on Patreon. Greetings, and welcome to the Modern Alchemist channel. I'm Aubrey Forrest, the Modern Alchemist, and this is Alchemy After Hours. Well, hey guys, it's been a while since I've done one of these, and I swear the process is purifying for me, and which is probably why I keep doing it, because I just get to talk. So the thing that I want to just hammer in to absolute, concrete, solid understanding in your mind. You don't have to believe me, okay? Although I'm sure when you meditate upon this, you might be drawn to the same conclusion. But I want you to have this operationally functional, in your brain, so that when we talk about this concept, when we talk about things like time, specifically when we talk about time, you will know what I'm talking about, and there will be absolutely no question in your mind what it is that I'm talking about. And it's so important because as I've been working through this whole business of dimensions and planes of existence for the RUBEDO gang, which you can find, by the way, in the Kabbalion chapter 8, there's a whole thing that goes on about that, and it occurred to me that I need to really talk about time as well, because and how time functions within the universe, what it is that time is all about. And as a process of that, I am going to borrow from one of my, adolescent and adult heroes, Doctor Who. Now, keep in mind, I am a Doctor Who fan, and I have been a fan since Tom Baker. This is back in the 70s. And not every doctor has been my favorite, to be sure. There's some doctors I'm just like, meh. And others, that I just love. As a kid, I loved the wackiness of Tom Baker. As an adult, I'm like, wow, that's interesting. That's annoying. But, that's his character, and he typified a certain persona of the Doctor, which I really enjoyed. I found ingratiating to him as a person, and even, all the way to the end. And so, but I love how Doctor Who handles time, because they experiment with the idea of time. And the one doctor that I think handles time in my most favorite context and favorite way is David Tennant, the David Tennant Doctor. He's like the 10th Doctor. Well, here in this episode of Doctor Who, it's called Blink, which is probably one of my all-time favorite Doctor Who episodes that doesn't really have the Doctor in it, hardly, except for what you see on these video things. So I want to share with you just a little bit of how Doctor Who describes time, and then what I'm going to do is deconstruct what we just saw so that you will understand exactly how time operates within the eternal now and the mind of the all. So let's let the Doctor give a stab at it, shall we?
People assume that time is a strict progression of cause to effect, but actually, from a non-linear, non-subjective viewpoint, it's more like a big ball of wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff.
Started well, that sentence.
It got away from me, yeah.
So, time is this wibbly-wobbly, large, in the space thing, and then he kind of loses track of it, because he, like myself, realizes as he's speaking, he's like, gosh, I've got to just sort of explain all this other stuff first in order to explain what this stuff means. Like, for instance, when he says the wibbly-wobbly, what he's describing, and he gives the image of it being his hands are out, right, like a globe, like he's the all looking in, because he says when it's not evaluated Subjectively, if you're on the outside of time, then it's all one time. It's all one now. It can be contained within the imaginary globe that you can create between your hands as you stretch your hands apart and kind of cup your fingers a little bit like you would if you were holding a volleyball or a basketball or a big beach ball. Anyway, from that perspective, then looking in, right, because you are objective now, which is the one perspective we can never have. We are incapable of objective perspective on any level. On any level, we could never get outside the universe because we are made from it. We can't leave it because it's with us. Where we go, it follows, and vice versa. So there's no getting away from that, not in that physical context. And that's really what the whole discussion in the RUBEDO group is going to be, is, well, can I phase through? Well, can I do some kind of thing? If people are experiencing the Mandela effect, are they sort of vibing in through one universe and out of another? You know, is it possible that it was a less favorable universe because Mandela died in the 80s? And those of you who don't know about the Mandela effect, it's this thing which my initial impression is that it's always like some mind game going on, but to see just how stupid we are. But it's this thing which essentially says that there's stuff that's going on in multimedia that's captured it, or in signs or whatever, and that we remember it differently than it actually is. And there's all sorts of examples. You can Google it. I don't even want to go into it. But what if those people that are Mandelaing out are kind of vibing backwards and forwards, sideways between what they remember as a universe and something else? Well, to explain all of that, I still had to explain some other stuff. And so I feel it was going to be a lot easier just to kind of hang out together over some drinks and talk about this in a more relaxed setting where both of our minds are more operational than confining it into something which we can do later, but for as an introduction, because this is all just introduction. I'm just showing you where the door is and saying this is what's down that hall. So this is that door, and the door is time. And the idea is what we're going to talk about from this point forward, deals exclusively with time. And the fact that, as I was saying before, what we think of time is not what time is. And because our perspective on time is so subjective, every evaluation of time has to give it a quality that is actually real. Because we experience its passage, we find ourselves aging. We watch things around us die, and as such, we know that time and death are tied together. They're irrevocably tied together because time begins and time ends, right? And as such, anything with a beginning or an ending is subject to death. Each moment passes, therefore it too dies. You know, the future is born only to die a moment later. I mean, philosophically, this stuff, if you're that kind of person, it can get you that joygasm going when your mind begins to just completely immerse itself within all that can be contained in the concept of time as it weighs against us, as we experience it. And we're always experiencing it subjectively. Now, what exactly are we experiencing? What law or principle of correspondence can guide us to understand what it is that we are actually experiencing? Well, there's another video that I go to great length of giving an extraordinary analogy with gumballs and talking about increased states of gumballs. You know what? After a while, I've re-reviewed that, and it's like I'm too complicated there. Here's, in fact, what time is. Time is a measure of the principle of rhythm by virtue of the principle of vibration. That's it. That is what time is. And cause and effect is a consequence of the principle of rhythm being actuated as a result of the principle of vibration. So let's take a look at this then. What does this mean in practical terms? Well, subjectively, the rhythm that we understand, rhythm is a cycle, and vibration means that all things are in motion. So in the simplest form of motion that we observe in the universe, whether we're looking at atomic structure or we're looking at solar systems, is that something is orbiting something else. So that there's a positively charged body at the center, and as you progress outward, you find negative fields of negative progressively outward. And this is true in atomic structure, and we find the same thing is true when we evaluate the universe on the basis of plasma physics and the electric universe, and we stand out. So we're looking at these orbital patterns. The sun is positively charged, and the earth and moons and satellites, everything that proceeds from that then receives a negative charge. And we've learned this as a result of comet science, observing comets like 67P. And watching that the snowball hypothesis was just that. It was just bunk. It couldn't hold any water, because apparently these comets are absolutely arid dry. Like, they have no water on them, but they produce all this gas and these emissions. And we've later determined that a lot of that is plasma that's being erupting from the surface as a result of it discharging, literally electrically discharging, as it moves from the outer system into the inner solar system and then back out. So this is all stuff that you think about as a basic process. I know it seems really complex, but really it's just a simple process of in and out. And of course, if we were to use a geometry, then it would be up and down, right? Because the base of the triangle would be against the circumference of the circle. So the point of the highest most point would be the innermost point, pointing to the center. I'm just trying to remind you of some of this three-dimensional geometry and how it applies to everything, including later on when we talk about archaeology and you look at the structure of a pyramid. You can see that the pyramid then is giving us a three-dimensional presentation of a hypertropoid, where the highest point on the pyramid then would be the innermost, uppermost point of the temple. Anyway, so, and all of it's based on just an understanding of the structure of the universe, as I'm showing you here objectively. But subjectively, we're built on exactly the same principles, but everything around us does that. And the thing that we observe the most, that gives us the greatest sense of rhythm, regardless of where you live on planet Earth, is the sun rising and the sun setting. And that's a result of our orbit around it. And so this rhythm, this process, which then is a result of the wobble of the Earth, gives us seasons, right? That is something that we count. And because we observe things going from young to old and dying, we attribute a quality to the periodicity of that rhythm, when in truth, all we're watching is ticking points. It's gone around once, it's gone around twice, it's gone around three times, which is why a lot of times when I read some of these more ancient histories, mythological histories, that talk about how their culture has been there for 40,000 years, I begin to scratch my head and say, is this a current solar year that we're evaluating this on? Or is this like a year around, I don't know, the orbit of any moon around Jupiter, which is considerably faster, right? Then going around, or Mercury, for instance, would be 88 days is a year on Mercury. So 40,000 of those is a whole lot less than 40,000 of hours, right? And that's a whole lot less than 40,000 years if I happen to actually be on Jupiter, when we're counting its solar pattern. So where's that year being ticked off? That's what I begin to wonder when I read these just grossly inflated numbers. Anyway, so when we're counting time, then everything else is a measure of those cycles. It's a measure of the actual experience cycle of the planet's rotation and our rotation and orbit around the sun. That's how we measure our time. And everything going up to a year or beyond that to a millennium, or anything reduced like a second and then a nanosecond, each of these things, these increases or reductions, are all based around this simple scale. And the truth is that at no time is there any actual time. All we're counting is the wibbly-wobblies that Doctor Who tries to describe from an objective standpoint. And that's what the sun and the earth going around it would look like. wibbly wobblies, and imagine then a galaxy of wibbly wobblies, and then imagine galaxies, hundreds of galaxies and thousands and big giant mega clusters, all wibbly wobbling. And that is how everyone is wibbly wobbling at their own pace and measuring time at their own pace. So Klingons measure, I guess, in kilograms, and the oh God, the Daleks measure it in rels, and just everyone's counting time differently, because that's from their subjective perspective, and it's generated more than likely from their observance of a celestial phenomenon, a large enough wibbly wobbly. And our nuclear clocks are doing nothing more than watching the wibbly wobblies of an atomic particle decay, and as such, each one, all of the wibbly wobblies in an electric universe are subject to change and charge, and so they can speed up or slow down just like any motor, depending on how much juice is going into the system. So, and at no time is there time. It's so important to remember that, because you cannot move out of this paradigm if you're time locked. You can't see other places than just what's here if you're time locked. But if you're not time locked, if you recognize that there is a grander perspective and that you can work towards the edge of that, work far enough into it so that you don't have to displace your consciousness, you simply have to allow your consciousness to experience more than one layer of the same thing happening right now. That's the first level. And of course, to achieve that, you do something with your own wibbly wobbly, with your own rate of vibration. And that's what I'm going to be talking about in the advanced class later. But it's just so important to recognize, for right now and for all now, that while we age, while things pass, there is no time. Not as a principle of anything other than the observation of other principles. So that you remember that the time is then the measure of the principle of rhythm by virtue of the principle of vibration. That's it. That's what's time. And then cause and effect, again, we could say there is an ultimate cause and an ultimate effect. The ultimate cause would be the all. If I were Hindi, I would say the ultimate cause was Brahma opened his eyes and all things are created. And then when he blinks, it all goes away. And he opens his eyes and it's all back again. That is the ultimate cause. And then, of course, someone will be like, well, what causes Brahma to blink? And don't even go there. Okay. So for me, the ultimate cause need only be that the all had a thought, and this is it. This is what one experiences within the mind of the all. But this thought is not governed by time, just as the thoughts within our own mind are not governed by time. They are not. Within your mind, it is a timeless realm. And that is because it is revealing to you the truth of your creation. That you too are timeless, but you are consciousness housed in flesh, that as a result of so many wibbly wobblies and interactions with other wibbly wobblies, a degree of your own essence expires physically until it lasts you to expire, because you began, and this is the process that leads to your conclusion, and not just yours, but everyone, everything. Every absolute thing in the universe is subject to this exact same flow. Rhythm compensates for all things. And one could say that the principle of rhythm then is a principle governed by death, because it also is something that acknowledges a beginning and an end. And as such, and that beginning and that end is the course of the vibratory pattern. There's so much that can be gone into here, but I just wanted to wet your whistle, and I wanted you to understand that as you work through your meditations, all of us, when we start, it's like, I'm going to set a whole hour aside or 3 hours aside or the afternoon. And in the end, you don't need to do that unless you need to do that, right? In other words, if it's something that just is so cleansing that it's better than, any other alternative, then absolutely embrace it and do it, right? However, don't feel the pressure don't feel an artificial pressure that you have to dedicate so much time to be a good whatever or to be good at whatever. Once you've mastered the principle of rhythm and vibration as a measure of time, you can compress that experience so that you experience the same thing, but in a shorter period. In this way, what I'm describing for you is exactly a principle of light. So that on a lower wavelength, like red, the wavelength is longer. In other words, the trough between the two peaks is longer. As the vibration of that light increases, the wavelength decreases. So that light then moving up into the blue spectrum, right? The light has not changed. The only thing, what the light is hasn't changed. The only thing that has changed is that its periodicity has compressed so that more work can be accomplished in a shorter period of time. More work in most cases means purification or disruption of a system, because that blue light just hammers into a lower wavelength form. But we've talked about the cell stuff in other times. But ultimately for yourself, that means more work can be done in a shorter period of time. And that is the result of the principle of vibration raising, and then rhythm will compensate, meaning that the time you need in order to accomplish the same activity then is reduced. Oh man, it feels so good to have gotten all that out. I have just been working on this for days, and I'm so relieved that I finally got that out. I got that whole idea out, absolutely out. I'm so grateful. I'm just super, super happy. That felt cathartic to be able to explain that concept to you, so that with this bedrock, with this understanding of what time actually is, that there isn't a dimension of time unless that dimension is described in terms of vibration. So that that dimension isn't actually a place to go to, but it is a quality of a principle that embeds all things that are experienced within the third dimension, meaning the one that we currently reside within. So that within all of that then would be a dimension of vibration that allows all of this to function. So if time were described as the fourth dimension, and that was associated with the principle of vibration, then esoterically, philosophically, experientially, all of this is sound. How ironic, right? Sound, because sound is vibration. So, but this is sound logic, and that you can bank on it. So I'm so glad I got this done, and I hope that you guys enjoyed this episode of Alchemy After Hours. Definitely something to think about, and definitely those of you in the RUBEDO group, this is foundation material for the stuff that we will be discussing when we're talking about other dimensions. But for now, I want you to recognize that time is a measure of the principle of rhythm by virtue of the principle of vibration. I'm Aubrey Forrest, the Modern Alchemist, and this has been Alchemy After Hours, and tonight we talked about time.